所以这个话题其实非常非常重要，我们也经常接到这样的request，说到底这个文书怎么写才能够让它成为它那个位置，它那个窗口所展现给招生官们在 evaluating 我们学生的整个的 portfolio 的时候，至少不拖后腿，至少能够结合的比较好，能够成为整个故事的非常切合和助力的一部分。那么今天晚上我们就这个话题来进行一些研讨和讨论。
All right, thank you, Sophia. As Sophia mentioned, I'm a former attorney. I practiced law in Vancouver and then in New York City, but I ultimately left law to get a master's in journalism from Columbia University. And it might seem at first glance that those two occupations are quite different, but actually there's a common thread. And the common thread is that both of them are focused on the importance and precision of written language. So in law and in writing, generally in journalism and any kind of writing, the particular word that goes into a contract or a piece of legislation or how a sentence is constructed, all this has a huge impact on the meaning and the impact. And writing is exactly the same. And Sophia also mentioned that writing is in my blood, and that's completely true. My grandfather was an English professor and a well-known biographer. My mother is a historian who's written many books. My aunt is a poet. I have a cousin who's an English teacher and a novelist. And my brother is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist for a major newspaper. So basically, I could not escape getting into writing as a career. So that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So before we talk about common mistakes, you really, in order to understand what makes either a good or a bad personal statement, you have to know, you have to understand what colleges are looking for in an applicant. And this has changed substantially over the past few decades. So what are colleges looking for? Well, they're not looking for well-rounded students. When I was in high school, that's what they wanted. Students who were good at a wide variety of subjects, who perhaps did a sport and played an instrument or had some other artistic pursuit and a variety of hobbies. Well, that's not what they want anymore. So one of my favorite authors who writes about college admissions has said it very well. He said that colleges are looking for a well-rounded class of jagged individuals. So what does that mean? What it means is that when college admissions officers are evaluating applications, they are trying to construct a well-rounded incoming class for next year. And they want a certain number of students who are strong in computer science, let's say, some students who are heading into pre-med. They might want a certain number of students who are going to be interested in student government or be environmental activists or athletes or whatever it is. So each one of those students isn't going to be well-rounded and good at all of these things. They each have their own specialty. And when you put them all together, what the college gets is a well-rounded class. But the important thing to note is that the students themselves they're not looking for the well-rounded student. They're looking for basically specialists. So keep that in mind. What else are colleges looking for? Well, certainly American schools, diversity is very important. And I'm sure you all know that. But it goes beyond just racial and ethnic diversity. That's maybe what comes to mind first, but that's only one piece of it. Colleges are looking for a geographic diversity. They would like students from all 50 states if they can in the US and as many countries around the world as possible. They want students from urban areas. They want students from rural areas. They want students from every conceivable socioeconomic background. Students with all sorts of different political views and different activities. And also, don't forget, they want students who are interested in pursuing all sorts of different majors. And although computer science and engineering might be like the hot majors of the moment, no college is going to accept a class with 50% of their people who want to go into that field. They have faculty and departments in all sorts of different areas. So they want to fill all of those classrooms. So I've always, whenever I get a student who wants to major in the classics, like Greek or something, it's like, that's great for diversity. But if that's not you, don't worry. But when you're thinking about what to write your essay about, think about what's different about you. In what ways are you different from your other classmates or the other people who might be applying to this school, because those are the things that are going to help make you a useful addition to the mix of people who are going to be at the campus.
1 second, Arienne, you sound a little bit echoed. Not as clear as we tested. Sorry about that. Is everyone thinking it's okay?
I have done, the only thing I did was raise the volume on my speakers, but I didn't change anything else.
Okay. I think it's better. Does everyone think it's better? No echo. Okay. Some people say it's okay now. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So in addition to specialists, basically people who have a strong, strength in one or two particular fields and diversity, colleges are looking for students who will add to the campus. So they don't want students who are going to spend every waking hour in the library. What they want is students who are going to get involved in the campus. So participate in the activities, get involved, whether it's a student newspaper or athletics or clubs or anything like that. They also want students who are going to socialize beyond people from their own group. One of the purposes of having a diverse class of students is that they want students to learn from each other and to learn from people who have different backgrounds than they do and different viewpoints. And if students don't engage with other classmates who are outside, who have different backgrounds than their own, then that's not accomplished. So it's always good when there are examples to portray yourself as somebody who's going to interact with all sorts of different people and people who are different from you. Okay, so this sort of goes along with something I was just saying. Beware of looking like a professional student.
Sorry, Arienne, I still think audience, they said it's still a little bit echo. So they said maybe stay away from mic, might be help. I don't know.
Okay, how's that? I mean, I'm not all that close to my computer.
No improvement, like fine. Okay, so you just said that you increase the volume of your speaker.
I turned it down now because I had turned it up before, but it's lower now. Is that better?
Somebody said lower the noise suppression. That's like so professional. Okay. Yeah, you can. I think it should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, give it a try.
Yeah, please.
I did not change anything, so it should be the same. Okay, so I was saying that to beware of looking like a professional student. It's understandable why students spend so much time working on their classes and caring about their grades and studying for tests like the SAT. But college admissions officers know that success on the college campus and success in life are not all about your GPA and your test scores. And they want students who recognize that too. So make sure that that comes across. If it seems like the only thing you're doing is studying, that's not going to help you to get into college. Oh, hang on just a second. Okay, so why is the personal statement important? Well, I'm sure everybody realizes that the number of applicants applying to all of these schools goes up every year, and it's now tens of thousands. And when you think about the number of applications that each of these schools receives and the number of spots that they have, and also the number of admissions officers who have to read these applications, you can see the problem. In 2018, the Wall Street Journal published an article saying that admissions officers typically spend 8 minutes reading an application. And 8 minutes is pretty short. I mean, each of you students has spent a lot of time doing all of the activities and studying and putting a lot of effort into all of the things that go into your application. And yet in 8 minutes, a decision can be made. And this was actually several years ago. The number of applicants has just gone up since then. So the amount of time that admissions officers have to look over an application is really very short. So what does this mean? Well, it means that since they don't have much time, you have to be very careful in what you do, and you have to take advantage of every opportunity. So in your essay, you don't want to waste time telling them things they already know. So you have to catch their attention as quickly as possible and not repeat information. It's also extremely important that you not send them additional information. There are some colleges who have optional essays. Students often think, well, it says optional, but I should really do it anyway. This is not true at all. You should only submit additional essays or additional documents if they're going to add something important that's not already in your application. So this is the case where more is not better. If you send them extra information that they don't really need and isn't very strong, it's only going to take time away from them focusing on the stronger parts of your application. So think carefully before you send extra information. So the point of the essay is for college admissions officers to get to know the person behind the data. They have your transcript, they have your test scores, they have your letters of recommendation and your list of activities, but those things tend to look the same. So the essay is the one opportunity that you really have to put a human face to your application. So don't waste the opportunity, make it count. So I like to think of it a bit like dating apps. When you have dating apps, you have people who have to make a snap judgment about somebody else's desirability based on really limited information. And college admissions officers have to do the same thing. They have limited information, but they have to make a quick judgment on somebody. So you want your essay to kindle that spark of attraction. You want the admissions officer to fall in love with you just a little bit. You know, they've got to have a crush on you and think, oh, I really like this person. And the key thing to remember there is nobody falls in love with a GPA. That's not the kind of thing that attracts people. So you have to find the little things that are going to spark that attraction. Okay, so how do you choose a topic to write about? The first thing that you have to remember is that it's not about your accomplishments. And you need to stop thinking about what's going to impress admissions officers, because it doesn't work. It bores them. The rest of your application is already telling them that you're an impressive applicant. So that's not what you're going to do in your essay. In your essay, you want to show them what kind of person you are. You want to show your personality. So how do you do this? Well, it's honestly, it's tricky to find the right topic, but think about what things you genuinely love to do. Again, don't think about what's impressive. Think about what you really enjoy. And it might be an activity you've already listed. It might not be. It might be something that nobody else sees the value in. That's fine. What things are you genuinely interested in? What are you curious about? What do you like to read about and learn about when you have free time and when nobody else is around? What do you do? And why do you do those things? Give some thought to why you chose the activities you did, other than because you think it's going to help you get into college. That's never a good answer. So think about the things that you really enjoy. Are there connections between them? Are there reasons that those things appeal to you and interest you? You can think about, is there any significant events, or are there things about your environment that have helped to shape you as a person? Those things can be effective too. A lot of people ask about which common application essay prompt should they answer. And I will tell you what I do. When I'm working with students, we don't even look at the common application essay prompts, because the goal is always to find the best possible topic that will help a student showcase what is unique about them as an applicant. And then when they're done writing the essay, if it happens to fit within one of the prompts, that's great. If it doesn't, there is prompt number 7 is a catch-all, and you can put any essay into that. But now, not everyone is going to have the opportunity to work with a consultant or have somebody to help guide them in finding a topic. And so some students do find the common application prompts helpful in terms of brainstorming possible topics for their essays. So because of that, we're going to just take a quick look at them, and I'll point out some things for you to look out for. Okay, the first topic, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that's so meaningful they believe that their application would be incomplete without it. Okay, so that's that's fine. A lot of people write about that. If it's one of their major activities that you do, you can certainly write about that, but you have to make sure not to focus on your accomplishments. You have to use the activity to say something else about you. So you can talk about your reasons for it, or does it connect to larger themes in your life? You have to, again, find something more to say. Don't just tell them your accomplishments in that particular activity. The second prompt, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Account a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? Now, this particular prompt is not one of my favorites, and it's because it's really difficult to write an original essay based on this. Most of the obstacles and challenges that high school students have are pretty similar. I mean, there are exceptions, but by and large, many of you have had a lot of the same challenges and difficulties. So it's hard to write an original essay on that. But in addition, the second piece of that, which is, how did you deal with it and what did you learn from the experience, is equally predictable. You face an obstacle, you figure out a solution, you learn to persevere. But this is pretty boring. A lot of people are going to say the same thing, and that's not going to catch anyone's attention. So unless you have a particularly unusual challenge or obstacle, I would caution students to maybe steer clear of that prompt. Number 3, reflect on a time when you questioned your challenge or belief or idea. This one can be very effective because if you think about it, college education is really all about questioning beliefs. I've had students who have written successful essays about challenging their faith. That can work well. You could certainly write an essay about challenging the political beliefs that you grew up with. I think there are fewer topics that would fit within this, but it can be effective. The next one, which is actually number 4, reflect on something that someone has done for you that's made you happy or thankful in a surprising way, and how has this gratitude affected or motivated you? This is a new prompt. I think it could work for some people, but in general, I think unless the student is particularly interested in majors or careers that have to do with service to others, for instance, somebody who wanted to go into social work or psychology or maybe even teaching, for those people, it might work well to write an essay like this because it could tie in with their career goals. Other than that, if it works and really ties into something fundamental about their personality and your ambitions and your outlook on life, it could work. But I haven't seen great essays on this one yet. The next one, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. The danger with this is that discussing an accomplishment can often lead to bragging and trying to sound impressive. So if you choose to write your essay in answer to this prompt, remember to focus on the personal growth piece, because that's really the important part and not the accomplishment. The next one, describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? This can be good. The danger with this prompt is that you would write too much about the actual subject and not about yourself. So you need to remember that they don't want an essay on the topic. Let's say it was, astronomy or something. You're not writing an essay on astronomy. With any prompt that you answer, or really any topic for your personal statement, the ultimate subject is yourself. So you use whatever this is as a way to tell people something about yourself. If you can do that, it's going to be an effective essay, but you just need to be wary of spending too much time showing off your knowledge. The final prompt is sort of any topic of your choice. And this is the one that most of my students usually end up using, because it doesn't really matter which one you submit it under, just write a good essay, and nobody's even going to look to check whether it fits the particular prompt you put it under. So you can always use that one. Okay, So let's say you've thought of a few ideas or maybe even written an essay. How do you know if it's good? Well, you need to ask yourself a few things. The first thing is it memorable and interesting? And if it's not, then it's not going to be an effective essay. One of the things that even if you pick a very good topic that would be memorable and interesting, when you're writing it, you need to make sure that you don't spend time at the beginning of the essay giving a lot of background and setting the stage, because you don't have time. The admissions officer will lose interest, and 650 words is pretty short. So you want to get right to the main point. It's much more effective in an essay to start right away with an interesting story or a bold or unexpected statement, and try and pique the reader's curiosity. The more you can do that right away, the better chance that they're going to read the whole thing and be captivated by it. The next thing you have to ask yourself is, what is the essay telling the reader about you? And you have to remember that not every good essay is going to be a good application essay. There are a lot of essays that would be wonderful in a writing contest or an assignment for school or something else, but they don't actually say something meaningful about you. Or perhaps they say something that's not all that flattering. Either way, you need to think about what your particular essay is telling the reader about you and make sure that it's something positive and meaningful. The final thing you need to ask yourself when you're evaluating a possible essay topic, and this is really the most important piece, is could any other student write a similar essay? And if the answer to that is yes, then you need a new topic. It's not going to get the job done. So in my experience, students do not spend enough time looking for the best topic. Instead, they tend to sort of latch on to the first topic they come up with that they think is going to work. And then they spend a lot of time writing and revising, thinking about it, revising some more in the hopes that eventually it's going to be a great essay. The problem is, if you don't pick a good topic and one that's really going to be effective, it doesn't matter how well you write it. It's not going to be an effective application essay. So you really need to take the time to find a good topic. And that's truly half the battle. It's more important than the writing. So think very hard about the content of your essay. And once you've done that, the writing piece usually becomes easier as well. Okay. So now let's talk about some of the mistakes that people frequently make. And I've touched on a few of these as we've been talking about other things. So the first mistake that I see frequently is students repeating information from elsewhere in their application. Now, it's one thing to have your particular activity listed, and if it comes up in the essay, you're going to have to expand. But you have a list of awards, you have a list of activities, and there are all of these things that are in other parts of your application. Try not to repeat anything that's elsewhere in the application or make a big deal about it. You want to use every opportunity to add something to your application. If you're repeating something, if you're taking up space to repeat things that the application officer already knows, you're wasting the opportunity to tell them something new. So be careful of that. The next two are kind of similar. Sounding like a resume or trying to sound impressive. Now, resumes are intended to be impressive, and people usually try and inflate what they were doing and make it sound as impressive as possible. Your application essay is not supposed to sound impressive. It's supposed to sound real and personal and authentic. So you're not going to rehash all of your accomplishments or tell the admissions officer why you would be a good student. And you're not going to try and sound impressive. You're just going to be who you really are. Being predictable is another mistake. So this is often a problem with the topic. If it's covering something that's just too common, like the obstacles leading to perseverance, that's just predictable. So that's not going to work well. Sounding too formal. This is another problem I often see in first drafts. You've spent your high school career working on academic essays. And so and many of you are very good writers, but And an application essay is an entirely different type of writing. The goal is different, the style is different, and it needs a different approach. So since it's not an academic essay, first of all, it's not going to have the same structure. This is not the sort of essay where you're going to need a thesis and have to back it up. Where you're not going to, come up with your statement, oh, that you should accept me at the school because I was wonderful and list reasons. It's not that kind of a structure. You should avoid using academic sounding words like moreover, therefore, consequently. All of those things sound great when you're submitting an essay like for your, AP US history or world history or whatever, but they're not going to work in an application essay. And in fact, this is one of the rare opportunities when, for example, you can use contractions. So that's fine, can't, won't. Contractions are fine. Slang is fine. You can use your authentic voice. So write it the way you would write it if you were speaking to, a knowledgeable friend. Not like totally casual, but at the same time, you can be much more realistic and more casual in the way that you're writing this. And doing that will help the admissions officers to see some personality. And it's okay to even have a little humor in there if that's you. The point is to really show who you are. So don't be too formal and make it sound too academic. Wasting space on ineffective scenes and dialogue. If any of you have actually done Google searches and looked up essays that worked, you're going to see that an awful lot of them start with a scene about the student, often going back to their early childhood, and it's described in detail, and there will be a few quotes, some dialogue between the people who are in the scene, and then it gets to the point. Once in a while, those things are useful, but this is such a common style now, it's become like an overused formula, and it often takes up a lot of space. And if it's really good and the dialogue, somebody said something so well, it's become your personal mantra, then fine. But don't waste space on something that could be said more effectively in a different way. Just because you keep seeing essays that do it doesn't mean you need to. And in fact, it's a reason not to. So unless there's a particularly important reason to have that scene and dialogue, be careful about doing that. The final common mistake is not proofreading. Now, for those of you who may not speak English as a first language, I'm not saying that the English needs to be perfect. And in fact, it's important for your essay to be an accurate representation of your writing. Polished as much as you can, but you do not want it to be perfect or to sound like an adult wrote it, because that's a red flag to admissions officers. And it's fine if there are occasional errors, but what you don't want is to have it look like you didn't care enough to check it and make sure that it was your best effort. If you have like really obvious spelling mistakes, or if you're missing a word, then you obviously didn't even proofread it. So make sure you don't do that. I don't want people to stress out incredibly about, again, their writing being grammatically perfect. It needs to be authentic, but make sure you check it and it really is as good as you can make it. Okay, so another thing that we should talk about is the timeline. A lot of students are going to be applying under early decision programs, and the ED deadline for most schools is around November 1st, and the decisions come out in mid-December. And then the deadline for regular decision applications is usually around January 1st. So I know it's very tempting if you submit an early decision application that once you click submit, you want to breathe a sigh of relief, go celebrate, and relax. And a lot of students want to relax until they find out in mid-December. But that's a very risky strategy to take. I'm sure that most of you realize that admissions decisions are incredibly unpredictable. People can get waitlisted or rejected for all sorts of reasons that have nothing to do with their individual merit or how good an applicant they really are. So unless you're virtually guaranteed to be admitted at your ED school, you really do need to spend some of the time preparing for your regular decision applications. So take a few days off, even take a week off to clear your mind, but then you need to take some action and get ready for the next round. Now, this doesn't mean you actually have to write all of the essays. However, what I tell my students is that they should research all of the schools on their regular decision list. And that means like looking up all the information online that they can about the academic programs, about the extracurricular activities, any special programs they have, maybe internships or co-op programs. It might be things about their dorm setup or any special traditions about the school, but like research every school that they're thinking of applying to and make sure you really know why you would want to be there. Then it's a good idea to rank them in order and have an order of preference in mind, because when you get down to the crunch, students don't always have enough time to write the essays for every school. And sometimes they add some at the last minute, and sometimes they take some schools off the last minute. So it's a good idea to know which to rank them so you know which ones to do first. Quite a few schools now offer ED2 or EA2 options, and that's another thing to think about if you have some second choice schools and would at least like to have an answer sooner. Definitely consider those. What I recommend that you do is to make a list of all of the essays that you're going to need for the writing supplements for every school that you're planning to apply to in the regular decision round if you don't get into your ED school. Once you've done that, again, you don't actually have to write all the essays, but at the minimum, I would recommend that for, let's say, at least the top 5, you have done all of the research for all of the essays that you need for all those schools and write an outline, have like bullet point answers for how you're going to answer every question on the writing supplements for these schools. It's a fair bit of work, but it will pay off if you need to do those applications, because if you have all the information and you've taken the time to make an outline and you have your answers, then writing is not going to take so much time when you actually have to crank out all of those applications by January 1st. And that's over the holiday season. And I'm sure, none of you are going to want to spend all of your time doing essays then, but it will make the process a lot faster and less painful. So that's how I would recommend you spend your time. So if you're looking for inspiration for your own personal statement, if you do Google searches, you will see that there are hundreds and hundreds of sample essays available online. And particular colleges also post, some of them post sample essays from students who are admitted. So you can, if there's a school that you're looking at that does have that, it's worth looking at the essays to see what kind of students, what kind of essays they like. So I thought I would just talk about a couple of particular essays, and then also mention some of the other topics that I've seen essays about that might help to prompt some ideas for all of you. Probably the most well-known college admissions essay is the Costco Essay. This was written by Brittany Stinson a few years ago, and it's not a perfect essay, but what she did 2 things incredibly well. If you look at her essay, if you Google Costco Essay, it should be very easy to find online. So her essay basically starts with a scene of her as a toddler shopping at Costco, and it goes on to talk more about Costco.
Hi, Arienne, can
Yes.
you stop sharing the screen so I can actually share my
Oh,
screen to show?
sorry.
Yeah, because I tried, but just kick me out all the time. Okay, let me see if anybody. Okay.
There we are. Okay.
Wait a second. Yeah. So okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Costco.
So yeah, you scroll down and we can see the start of it. Okay. So if you read the first paragraph, we have her scene, and it's not perfect. There are things that I don't love about this, but she paints a vivid picture of her as a toddler running through Costco. The first thing to notice is that, you probably haven't read most of the admissions officers would not have read anything about this. So it was unusual. And she goes on through the rest of the essay and writes pretty well. But the two things that she did best, and the reason this essay was so effective and got her into a lot of schools and then went viral, was because she did these two things well. One, she had a very unique topic. I guarantee you that she was the only applicant that year who wrote a personal statement that focused on Costco. The only one. You know that the admissions officers were saying, oh yeah, the Costco girl. So they instantly had an easy way to remember her, and it stuck out. So she nailed that. But the other piece of it, which was equally important, she had a unique topic, but she used it as an opportunity to say something meaningful about herself. So the story about Costco was showing off her curiosity and her passionate curiosity to find out new things and get new information and try things. And her essay shows how this spills over into the rest of her life. And this is how she approaches her academics and her activities. So that's what made it effective. It was the combination of those two things. Somebody else writing an essay about Costco might not have been able to write an effective essay. But because this was the perfect example showing her curiosity and the type of person that she is, her personality. So that's what made this a particularly effective essay. So you don't have, it's not just about looking for the oddest or most unusual thing to write about, but it has to be one that's going to say something meaningful about who you are. So you can definitely read through this one at your leisure later. It's a good essay. As I said, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. The bottom line was she was memorable and she said something meaningful and important about who she is. So the second essay that I wanted to mention was written by Cassandra Shao, and it was who immigrated to the US from Malaysia. And this one it's tougher to write a unique and effective essay about being an immigrant because it's such a common experience in this country. So it's hard to make that work. However, again, she took a slightly different take on it. So in her essay, and I like her beginning here too, like in our house, English is not English. Okay, that instantly you're thinking, what? What is she talking about? This is, and it does capture your interest. So you want to find out, what does she mean? And writing her essay about the difficulties that she and her mother have with English was a different take on it, and an interesting one, and probably not the typical essay that people would read about an immigrant. But it was a combination. Again, just writing that alone would not have made this as effective. The reason it works is because that particular topic was tied to the activities that she did later, whether it was in creative writing, in poetry, and helping ESL students. That story tied well to her other activities and some fundamental things about who she is. And she also did it with a bit of humor and, some vulnerability. She wasn't afraid to show that her English wasn't perfect and that she mispronounced things, and in a humorous way. So the combination of the two things is what makes it effective, finding an interesting, unique topic, but one that then says something meaningful about the student. And she did that very well, I think. Again, you can finish reading this or read it, more closely at your leisure. I'm going to go back to the other screen if we're done looking at this one. Okay. Is it? Okay. So when you're looking, I've read through a lot of essays online, and there are some that I think can help spark ideas for other people. I've seen a few very effective essays focusing on objects. There was one student who wrote about the stickers that are on his or her laptop, because each sticker represented some event or activity that was particularly meaningful. So it was sort of, the laptop was a symbol of who they who that student is. Another student did a similar thing, but with a pair of sneakers that they had written on and basically done, written and drawn on through the course of time. That can work. If there's, I often ask students, do they have a prized possession? Sometimes people have something that's especially meaningful for various reasons, and that can act as a good focus for an essay. I saw a very good essay on growing up as a middle child in a very large family. Again, you have to be able to do these things well and have something interesting and slightly unique to say. But if you think about various things, there are often you can find a way to make it work. Hobbies can work, but preferably if they're unexpected and unusual ones. I had a STEM student who wrote about surfing. That was a main hobby of his, which was sort of unexpected given his family background and his other activities. And I have seen a couple of essays, but surfing is a fairly unusual hobby and the kind of thing that's likely to, attract the attention and interest of an admissions officer. Stamp collecting. Once upon a time, that was a really popular hobby, but these days, stamp collecting would be a very, very unusual hobby. So, if you have some unusual interest, it can work. There are quite a lot of essays about cooking or favorite foods. These can be effective, but again, it has to be only if there's something about the particular activity or the food that connects to something meaningful and important about you as a person. So you can't just do it because you think it'll be funny and entertaining. It has to say something meaningful. So hopefully that will give you maybe some ideas or places to look for ideas when you're writing your essay. And I wanted to finish with one sort of final thought, because I know this process is extremely stressful for students, and I really empathize. I know how difficult it is, and the demands and the expectations, and it seems like students are expected to do so much. We're expecting students to be superhuman and have resumes that people my age wouldn't have even dreamed of having. So if you need a break and a good laugh and maybe a little perspective on it, I recommend that you go to the website that I have listed here. It's probably the first college application essay that went viral way back in 1990. But I do want to point out it was not actually the student's personal statement. It was a satirical essay that he wrote and submitted to a writing contest. But it's brilliant. But do not copy this for your personal statement. This is only for entertainment. But I hope it gives you a good laugh, because it is really, truly a brilliant essay. Sophia said that we might have time for questions. I think we do, if people have specific questions they want to ask. Should I stop sharing this here? Or?
One question says from Eric Mom. Okay, great. Does my professionalism differ based on my interests? I have an interest in medicine, which is highly demanding. How should I approach my personal statement based on this?
Unless there's a particularly unusual reason why you're interested in medicine, I don't recommend writing your personal statement about your interest in medicine. Often a lot of the colleges in the writing supplement will ask about your major and why do you want a particular major, and that might be a good opportunity to talk about your interest in medicine. The difficulty in using that for your personal statement is there are so many other students who also have an interest in medicine, and probably for similar reasons, that it's very hard for a personal statement about that to stand out as being really unique and interesting. So that's tough. I think I would, if possible, I would save that for the writing supplements where they ask about your intended major and try and find something else. That could be totally unrelated for the personal statement that will show a different side of you that's not really related to your professional goals.
Okay, great, thank you. And also I have the screen showing on the left-hand side is a barcode. If anyone want to have a further conversation to understanding Arienne coaching style and also interest in finding out more detail, you can scan the barcode on the left-hand side. If you just want to have a general getting to our college application community, you can also scan the barcode on the right-hand side. We will be bring you into the WeChat group. Okay, next question from Elias Shu. If a student hasn't experienced any accomplishment outside of his school and has no goal for colleges, how do you coach them to write an essay?
So here, can you explain that a bit? Okay, so the student
no accomplishment outside of school.
No accomplishments?
No accomplishment. Doesn't have anything significant, and also doesn't know what school to college to go to. How do you coach them to write an essay?
Okay, if they don't know what school to go to, I mean, I definitely recommend going to somewhere that has lots of options, maybe a good liberal arts college where there are many choices, and one where you don't have to pick a major too soon, where you will be able to sample lots of different areas. Maybe one that has a core curriculum where you're required to take courses in a wide variety of disciplines, because that can help you decide what you want to do. In terms of the personal statement, it doesn't really matter whether you have accomplishments outside of school. I mean, if you think of the Costco essay, it had nothing to do with accomplishments. It was just about who she is, you know, and the things that she likes. So it's not really about that. If you're thinking, again, I feel like a lot of families, and maybe particularly Chinese families, want to write their personal statements about accomplishments or things that are impressive because they put a lot of time and energy and they think this is what's going to help. It's already in your application. It's not going to help make an admissions officer, you know, fall in love with you at all. That's not going to make them care about you personally. So you need to find the things that say something personal about who you are. And the fact that you might not have an accomplishment outside of school, it doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Chinli Dai, asking when I do not duplicate some information in my application, what if some information will be missed by the admission officer since my application will only be reviewed in a few minutes?
Okay, so in general, the courses that you've taken and the GPA, the test scores, those are going to be for like the first cut. Let's say the people, maybe 20% of the applicant pool just doesn't have good enough grades or test scores to even be in the ballpark. So they're automatically out. But once you're above that, it doesn't really matter that much how much more. So they know, okay, good student, took solid courses, you know, decent test scores, they're in the maybe pile. So then you have to catch their attention. And sometimes somebody has like a really strong interest or they have some accomplishment. Let's say they won, you know, the Intel science competition. Well, okay, that's going to be big. But for the bulk of students who don't have anything that clear, or they haven't gone to the Olympics in their sport, you know, then you have to sell who you are as a person. So it's really all about finding the things that are going to be memorable and showcase what's unique. Like, what are you going to add to the campus? Do you have a different perspective because you've spent a lot of time gardening, or whatever it may be? Or it could even be about, you know, how you interact with your classmates and what your personality is like, you know, or your family. But you really need to focus on the things that will be different from other students.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is from Junmei Zhang. When the essay is optional, should a student still submit it or not?
Yeah, most students think that when it says optional, you should write it anyway. And I mentioned this before, but that's not the approach to take. Only submit an optional essay or an optional document if it's adding something important to your application. So if it's just, say, repeating information, if it's answering the question, but it's not super important, but like, for instance, the COVID ones, a lot of schools now have, you know, do you have something, you know, do you want to say something about how you were impacted by COVID? Well, everybody was impacted to some extent. Unless you have some really extreme situation, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And the reason is this going to be one of the strongest parts of your application? Would you rather that they read that instead of your personal statement? So ask yourself if it's important enough to take their attention away from other parts of your application. If it's really adding something new that they don't already know. And there are situations where, for instance, somebody had, some severe, some major tragedy in their family, or something traumatic happened that they need to explain, why their grades dipped in one particular year, then that's fine. It's not elsewhere in the application. It's important for the admissions officers to understand. But don't submit something just because you think, okay, it's optional, so I really should. No. It will just take time away from the things that are really strong.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clear answer. Bella is asking what's some good websites to help students write their essay?
I mean, is it like the writing piece? I mean, there are a lot of websites by various college consultants that talk about essays. It's usually focused on, on finding a good topic. The writing piece, once you've found a good topic, the writing piece is actually easier than you think. Mostly the problems with writing are because you don't have anything to say, and you don't have anything to say because this isn't the right topic. The key thing that I guess my most important piece of advice on the writing is that you need to have a really catchy opening. 650 words is short to begin with. So you need to every sentence needs to count. You can't waste space on extra information that's not really important, but you also have to catch their attention right away. Time is short and they're reading a lot of these things. If you really want to catch the reader's attention, and with admissions officers reading, hundreds of thousands of these things, you need to get their interest in it right away. Pique their curiosity. So interesting opening line. The very first few sentences need to grab them.
Thank you. Okay, great. There's a parents want me to show this discard code. So here is Connie Tan. Connie Tan here is join our discard. Okay, next one question is how to keep your essay concise and to the point.
That's one of the hardest things for students. It's one of the easiest things for me. I usually ask my students to, when they're writing their first draft, I ask them to aim for 800 words, 850 even. And because it's super easy to cut stuff out for me. One of the things that many students have a tendency to do in their writing is they tend to repeat themselves and overlap a bit. So they tend to say the same thing or almost the same thing more than once. And you don't have space for that. So you really need to cut things down. That's where it really helps to have somebody else look at it. And if you don't have an outside consultant, then maybe you have an English teacher or some other adult, preferably not your parent. No offense to parents, but it's often easier for some other adult to help a student. It's easier for somebody else to show you what to cut.
Excellent. Great. Okay. I see there's a audience raise a hand. Z Sun, I already unmute you. If you want to unmute yourself, you can ask a question directly. Z Sun, S-U-N. Hello, you there? Okay, maybe raise hand by mistake. Okay, let me ask next then. Jonathan Lee asking, I was told by high school administrator that SAT may not be required in the next couple of years. Would it be best to take SAT since there is a writing section including in the test?
I mean, a lot of colleges are now test optional, and I think many of them will stay that way. Whether you submit test scores really depends on what the rest of your application looks like and how well you test. The writing part of the SAT, I don't think colleges really look at. I mean, I think the one situation where I think they would look at it is if, for instance, your SAT verbal score is not very high, or your TOEFL score or something else is on the low side, and you send them in an application essay, which is perfect, then they might think, I'm a little suspicious about that. And they might go back and look at your SAT essay to see, does the writing match up? Because if not, then they're going to wonder, well, did you actually write the essay yourself? I don't know that there's an advantage to taking the SAT with writing. I don't think it really matters much, unless they specifically require it. And I don't know if any schools do anymore.
Okay, thank you, great. Okay, Kenneth Yan, thank you. You wrote a really, really respectful message. I really like it. He didn't only write it to host and panelists. Kenneth said, hi, Arienne and Sophia. My passion is economics. So would it be a good idea to use my hobby and passion in economics as a topic for my personal statement? Is that effective to highlight my passion?
If you are passionate about it, it will show through. So if, you can definitely write a very effective essay about that, but I would want to know, like, when did it start? Like, where did this passion come from? How do we see this? Like, and I assume if you say you're passionate about economics, it's more than just, oh, I took AP economics. But if you read all sorts of business news all the time, if you actually spend free time doing things related to that interest, and maybe you've been doing this since you were 5 years old or whatever, then sure. But the true passion will show through. But find the way to show it. Don't just tell them you're passionate about it. Find the things that show it.
That's the key words is don't tell me, show me, right? Okay, great. Lucy Lu, is ski can be a good hobby to write in the essay?
Skiing?
Ski.
Sure. I mean, it really depends. It certainly could be. And also, it's what does it say about you? Okay, so if you really like skiing and you spend a lot of time skiing, is it because you love the outdoors and you're interested in environmental issues and it connects to that? Is your interest in skiing that you love speed? You love everything that's fast. I mean, you need to think about, okay, so you really like skiing. How does that connect with the rest of who you are, and what does it say about you? Or is skiing the one time a year that you and your family get together to, connect just as a family? You've got to think about broader than just skiing. You can focus on skiing, but you need to make it connect to something else that's meaningful.
All right, thank you. And QW is asking, Arienne, mention early action 2 in the slides. What is early action 2?
There are some, early action, of course, is a non-binding early decision. So there are some schools that have 2 tiers of early programs. So the early decision or early action 2 will be ones that have later deadlines. So they might have the application might be due on January 1st, but instead of telling you on April 30th, you'll hear back in late February. So the ED and EA2 programs, the deadline is usually around RD, but you find out sooner than you would in regular decision.
Okay. All right, you can ask in more detail. There's a lot of terminology. You can find out more. I see Shou Ping is raising hand and Fred Xu is raising hand. So be ready. I already unmute yourself. So right now, Shou Ping, are you there? Do you want to talk?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to ask 2 quick questions because I had a discussion with some mom about this essay. So just want to kind of curious to what your thoughts are for those 2 things. One is there's some one mom mentioned that you know, the family went through a difficult time. The dad had cancer. When the kids were applying for college, and they decided to write about that in their personal essay to show how the kids overcome that difficult time. But they got pushed back from their advisor in a way, counselor, in a way that it's kind of, it's sad. Like, actually, a lot of people write about that. Like, the parents got sick or during that period of time. So their advisor actually kind of don't recommend write about that, you know, how they're, you know, the dad got sick and during that special period of time, and etc. So I was a little confused by kind of that. I'm just curious, how do you see that, write about kind of personal family unions as a part of the high school experience, as a part of the essay? That's my first question. Second question is, and also, I also kind of just curious that what if the personal essay, instead of focus on the accomplishment, would that be okay if the kids actually focus on the failures, kind of about the multiple failures, in, you know, like, you know, not good at sports, no, have academic difficulties in initial years, but kind of the kids learn from the failures and get stronger, learn how to be persistent. And then in the end, the kids get better. Kind of the whole essay, instead of focus on accomplishment, focus on learn from the failure and learn to be better from the failure. I think the downside of writing that is kind of make yourself an unimpressive person, even you are, you know, even you're telling the truth. So I'm just curious, kind of your thoughts on the second one as well.
Okay.
That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, so on the first question about, you know, the student with the parent who had cancer in his senior year or something, it's difficult to write a personal statement about something like that. You know, if somebody had a parent who had cancer when they were young, and it then impacted who they became and how they developed in their views for, you know, the next 10 years, it might work better. I would not use this as a personal statement because you have to ask yourself, what is it telling you about the student? Is it telling you something really important? The most important thing that you want colleges to know about the student? Yes, they had difficult times. Lots of people have difficult times, and they've probably managed to cope. But there's probably something else you could tell them. What I would do in that case is I would add that sort of thing into is there any other information you want to tell us? And most colleges will have that. And so if, for instance, the students were having a difficult time because they had to, you know, help care for younger siblings, or they were worried about their parent if they were spending time visiting them at the hospital, you could have a short essay in this extra section that's just explaining the situation so that the admissions officers are aware of it. But do you really want that to be the focus of what they're thinking about? Oh yeah, that's the student with the dad who had cancer. That's not really the hook that you want. And there's probably something else that they could say. So I would put that aside and use that just in the extra essay if it had an impact on their academics or their activities. You mentioned the thing about failures. The problem with talking about the failures and how it ultimately made the students stronger is that this is such a common and kind of predictable topic. This is sort of the obstacles. What did you learn from failure? Well, you learned to try again. You learned to persevere. It's too predictable. The way, I mean, if you had a student who, you know, the essay was going to be about all the things they tried that they didn't like until they realized what they really loved was something else. If it was sort of the lead in to something where they actually found their passion and something they were good at, you could use, it could work into it. But I don't think you would want the whole thing about how they've learned to, you know, be stronger because of all of these failures. I'm not worried so much that it's bad because it doesn't focus on accomplishments. That's not my issue with it. My issue with it is that it's too predictable and it's not going to stand out. There's probably something else that student has, something else about them that will stand out and that will make them more memorable.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Shouping. Also, I think you mentioned something about repeatedly, which is Arienne mentioned also a couple times. Personal statement is not placed to write about accomplishment, because you mentioned a couple times about accomplishment. The whole entire presentation is really try to correct that misunderstanding. It's not a place to write about your accomplishment. You have other place already tell the college admission officer their academic accomplishment, their activities, they're passionate about and entrepreneurship, or passionate about other things, volunteerism, leadership, those stuff. This place only talk about human side of the kids themselves, the human side of the kids himself. So I wanted to again make it clear, because we often hear the parents keep saying we have to show the accomplishment. Accomplishment is not. Okay, it's too much accomplishment, not in the personal statement. I wanted to emphasize that. Okay, Fred, you are next. Do you want to open your mic?
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Arienne and IvyCompass. My question is the format of the tutoring or the coaching section. Is this always going to be one-on-one type of training you can offer, or you also offer one coach, maybe 3, 4, 5, whatever, a few students, so the student may have opportunity to hear others' perspective? And do you think that's a good format, and how, what advantage or maybe disadvantage as well that may offer?
Is that question to me or to
Yeah,
Sophia?
that I think Fred's question is, he's thinking, because your service is providing one-on-one, and he's wondering, would that be beneficial to have some sort of group session? You have maybe coaching 2 or 3 students at a time, so they can brainstorming and listen to other people, other students' ideas and stuff. Is that beneficial, or you think it's not beneficial? Need to be one-on-one?
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting idea. I mean, all of my coaching is one-on-one, because every student's situation is unique, and it's just the process of introspection, of helping them to figure out who they are and what makes them tick. It's, in a way, it's often easier to do one-on-one because students are less self-conscious and about worrying about how they're going to appear in front of other people, which is also why it's helpful for me to deal with them directly and not always with the parents, because you really want to get to know the student, you have to, talk to them directly. The other thing too is that I feel like students already have so much pressure comparing themselves to other people, that in a group situation, if somebody else has a good idea, then they're going to think, oh, why I don't have something like that, why don't I have that? I mean, I do know that a lot of students to talk to their friends about it, and it can be helpful, but I feel like there's an awful lot of comparing, and then people end up just feeling worse about themselves. And it's really, there is no, magic topic or magic essay. It's just about each student getting to figure out who they really are, what makes them tick, what's interesting about them, what's unique about them. And I think that might be a little bit difficult to do in a group situation.
I kind of agree with you. I think, wanted to echo what you just said. It's not a test. Personal statement is not about getting a high score on a piece of writing. It's not like you're submitting something to enter in competition or something. It's about truthfully, in a unique way of telling other people what kind of person you are. So it's no right or wrong answer, right, Arienne? It's not about competition. It's not about getting a high score. It's about give a piece of opportunity to tell other people you are an interesting person. You're going to bring a lot of fun, a lot of diversity in the college community, right? So, okay.
Yeah, I raised this up because over the summer I talked to one of my high school friend. Actually, she got a good experience on the East Coast outside of the Washington, D.C. area. She said her daughter had such session. I don't know all the detail, but they end up a few students with one coach, and they did this relatively short, not so many times. And she, of course, ended up into Harvard. It sounds like a very pleasant experience for her and her daughter. I just wonder how well this is practiced, and what's the professional's views on this? Thank you for answering that question for me.
Yeah, interesting, Fred. I think you raised really good, interesting. Do you want to add my WeChat? We can talk offline. We can have that discussion. If there's something, I don't know how old your child is. We can talk about it, right? If there's something durable, something beneficial for our youngsters, we love to be open-minded, to providing.
Oh, thank you. I'll do that.
Of course. Yes, please. Thank you. That's great. Very interesting questions, and also thank you for bring to our attention. I appreciate it. Okay. I also have a Cindy, but Cindy, wait for a moment. Okay, I'm going to give you that floor. But next, I wanted to asking one question. I think it's very good. It's very common. From Amy Young. She's asking, what are the best brainstorming questions to self-reflect and come up essay topic? I thought this is an excellent question.
I ask students, I have a pretty long list of questions I ask them, but I think at the heart of it is sort of like, why do you do the activities you do? Why do you have the interests you have? Like, think about what you enjoy about those things. And this only works though if you're doing certain activities because your parents suggested them, or because you think it will help you get into college. That's not helpful. So I'm only thinking about the ones that you really do because you enjoy them. So I want people to think about why they do those things. Why do they enjoy them? What do they get out of them? I like to ask about, prized possessions, things like that, because they're often will connect to something meaningful to them. And I want students to think about what connects their interests and their passions. And it may be, often if they start thinking about these things deeply, like what is it they really like? Well, yes, they like economics, but why? Like, what is it about that subject that appeals to them? Is it that they're like a super logical thinker, or they're fascinated by human behavior, or whatever it is? I want them to try and find the common threads that tie together different parts of their interests and activities and passions. And that often helps them to figure out like what's really important, like what makes them tick, what gets them excited. It's not an easy process, but it takes some serious thinking. The best essays, and it doesn't matter whether you're a good student or not, but the best essays involve a lot of introspection. And, I've had students that we've gone back and forth, about ideas and trying to figure these things out for, quite a few times. But then when they finally figure it out and they see, oh yeah, this is why I'm like this is why these things appeal to me, because this is what they have in common. These are the connections, or this is why I am the way I am, because, I had this experience early on. It's a process, and hopefully at the end of the day, they feel like they know themselves better than they did before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Okay, next one from Erica Mom, asking, I think this is a student, how should I approach supplemental essays? Is it more storytelling based on where you have to base it off, an event or an idea? Can it be slightly more literate and talk about your experience in general?
With the supplemental essays, it really depends on the particular prompts. As a general rule, supplemental essays are much more straightforward. They're much easier to write, usually because they ask more straightforward questions, like, why do you want to go to this college? What are you interested in majoring in, and why? So for those questions, usually the word limit is much shorter as well. You don't usually have a whole lot of time for stories and anecdotes and stuff like that. So just answer them. Answer directly, don't waste a lot of time. There are exceptions. University of Chicago always asks really odd and unusual questions that are, fascinating. And some other schools have individual questions that are more creative as well. And if they've asked an unusual or creative question, there's more opportunity to tell stories or whatever. But In general, the writing supplement questions are pretty direct, and you should just answer them directly. If there's a reason why, okay, you want to major in this topic because you had this experience when you were younger, fine, but don't write a whole scene about it. Just tell them because this happened. You're not going to have the word count to like do some creative writing thing and write, describe the whole scene when when you had this revelation that you were fascinated by economics. Just tell them what happened.
Okay, thank you. I have a Lu Chuan Xu asking if we offering package for final essay editing for X numbers. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Just please scan the barcode on the left-hand side, and then you will fill a simple form. Somebody will follow up with you. Either me and Allison will follow up with you, and we can connecting to let you know where Arienne is able to help for the last minute essay editing for school numbers. Okay, yes, so we do. Okay, now let me open the floor to Cindy Sun. Cindy, you can talk, please.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I do have the quick question, but I'm not sure whether it is a good question to ask here. And right now, I think regarding the college application, the leadership talk a lot. And I just wonder, for a student who has a leadership, maybe inside of school, like a school club, or outside school, like other nonprofit organization or whatever, the club. So the value between these two different groups, like inside school or outside school, they value same, or school club leadership value more?
As a general rule, I would say that activities outside of school are more valuable. And that's because it takes more effort. It shows a higher level of commitment and interest to do something outside of school. At school, it's all there for you. It's super easy to stop by after school and go to this club or whatever. So in general, I think it's the ones that are outside of school. Even if you do an activity inside of school, if you take it to the next level, that usually involves doing something outside of school to really show, some greater level of commitment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Good question. Okay, next one, I give it to 硅谷百家谈. You can unmute yourself, please. Are you there? 硅谷百家谈.
Yes, it's me.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I want to have a question is, if the student get SAT 1,460, it is enough for the school MIT Stanford?
I don't know if you've ever seen the website Niche, N-I-C-H-E. They do, they have a lot of information and surveys on various colleges. And what they have, which is really nice, is a little chart that they do where they show GPA and test scores. And they have little dots for whether people were accepted or rejected. And what you will see is at every point, there will be people who get in with that SAT score, and there will be people who don't get in with that SAT score. So, you can't make an overall assessment on whether any given score is good enough to get into MIT or any other school. I would say that it's obviously a good enough score that student is in the ballpark. So then it's going to come down to all the other pieces of the application. It's not like having a 1600 is going to make that much, it's going to make you issue in either. It's, the extra points aren't as important as the other pieces in the application.
Right, okay. From a Jun Mei Zhang, is it okay to talk about learning disabilities and how a student works hard to work around the disabilities?
Okay, the working hard, again, is like most students work hard, and that's going to be sort of an assumption. I don't know that I would make that the focus of the personal statement, unless there's a super interesting story about, like, you know, they had dyslexia and the way they used to read. And if it ties in some other way to their future interests, are they now interested in linguistics or special ed teaching or something? But otherwise, that's another topic that I would leave to the extra information. If it's important enough, it could go in, you know, in the extra essays. If it's impacted their performance. If they're learning disabilities and they already have like an IEP or some accommodations at their school, it's also something that you can have the guidance counselor or letters of recommendation maybe can address. Sometimes there's information that is better to get across from somebody else. So if the guidance counselor at the school sends recommendations, that would be the perfect person to actually talk about the students' learning disabilities and how they've overcome them. So yeah, it is. And in fact, I want to make this point too. Often the most effective place to put really bragging statements, because I know parents want, like, they want the kids bragging stuff in there. The best place to put that is in letters of recommendation. If there's something you want your kid to brag about, they don't get them to do it. If they have a teacher, let's say they did incredibly well in, you know, some math competition or whatever, and their calculus teacher loves them, that professor can brag about what a great competitive math student this kid is.
Thank you, Arienne. Amy John's asking, do you provide a prestigious summer camp essay? Yes, we do. Arienne in the past helped many students applying for those challenging summer camp. She does. I know that for a fact. And also Rico, R-I-C-O, Rico Lee. Yes, I don't know what grade you are. If you wanted to add the WeChat code either for me and Allison, you're welcome to talk to us. We'll be happy to provide an answer for you, okay? Is it, from Lily Fan, is it better to not send the SAT score if they're lower than 1500?
I think what you have to look at is what else is in the application? Like, if the GPA is really good, if the student has good AP test scores, for example, or things like that, you know, then they probably don't need it. If it's not, you know, you also look at the particular, it depends on the particular college too, okay? So, you know, 1500 at one school, that would be great and in the ballpark. And at another school, it might be on the low side. As a general rule, though, I feel like most of the parents who are probably here tonight are thinking that the scores, like, they're thinking 1500, that's low, I shouldn't submit it. But if you look at the middle 50% of the admitted class of a college, because you can usually get that information from their website. So let's say the middle 50%, it'll tell you the cutoff scores. If your student score is in there, then I would submit it. The problem with not submitting a 1500 is that they might think, especially for Asian students, is that the admissions officer might think the score was way lower than 1500, and that's why you didn't submit it. When in fact, the 1500 would have been in the ballpark of students they were admitting. So just because the parent might be thinking, oh, my child could have done much better or should have done much better, doesn't mean it wasn't actually good enough to put them in the ballpark. So I think you need to, like, consider each particular college. If the score is within their range, then submit it. Because if you don't, they'll assume if you have taken it and you don't submit it, they're just going to wonder was it even lower. And 1500 is not low. It's fine.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. The next question coming from Jack. Does an interviewer already see my application form and already know my achievement and activities before coming to an interview? Do I need to repeat my information in my application, assuming the interviewer knows nothing about me during the interview? Interviewer.
An interview with an admissions officer or like an alumni interview?
Yeah, probably an alumni interview. They're asking.
They usually have the information in front of them. I don't think, and again, they're not interested in hearing your list of accomplishments. Again, that's already in your application. It's more important to show what your social skills are like. Can you have an intelligent conversation with an adult? You know, do you ask some questions? It's also an opportunity for the student to ask questions about the school. So have a few questions prepared. And the other thing that most interviews are not super important. There's like, if you're a terrible interview and you do something completely inappropriate, maybe that would take you out of the running. And there's a slim chance that if you were so incredibly impressive in the interview, that might help. But in general, it doesn't make a difference either way. I would treat it as more of an opportunity for you to practice your interviewing skills and to ask the interviewer questions about the school.
Okay. All right. This is from Lydia Chen. I don't know if you're still here. I think this is a student. So what topic should we write about personal statement? I am kind of confused because it seems like the best thing to do is write about how our experience shapes us. Yet you just mentioned it's not a good idea to write about difficulties and how they made us stronger, etc.
Well, not all experience is about difficulties. For instance, like the essay that I saw online about the student who was the middle child in a family with 5 children. And it wasn't focusing on difficulties, but he did a really effective job in showing how that sort of affected his outlook on everything and how this gave him certain skills. So it's not always about difficulties. The problem, if you're going to write about difficulties and how these have made you stronger, then you need to have some really unusual or extremely compelling difficulty. Keep in mind that most of these schools are going to have people, they're going to have immigrants who came over, boat people type immigrant stories, or people whose parents were like well below the poverty line. Or if you want to talk about difficulties, the problem is there are going to be some students who are going to have stories of like way more difficult circumstances. So the types of difficulties that most of the students that we're talking about and our kids have are much more, I don't want to say ordinary, they're more universal, or not even universal, they're more common and they don't rise to the level of being super compelling. So I'm not sure that I would necessarily focus on that. Again, writing about perseverance it's hard to make that interesting. Yes, it's important. There are plenty of experiences that you have that will shape you and are important to you, but might not be unique enough to work for an application essay. You need unique.
Yeah, that's the key words, okay? But it's very difficult to be unique because there's so many people out there. There's so many subjects being covered, so how can you be unique? Caring, persistence, hardworking, empathy. A lot of people wrote about it. So that's why it's difficult to settle down, one of the areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I think looking, I guess, maybe at the interests and hobbies and the things that you really like doing and learning about can be a little easier because everyone has their particular things. I had a student who wrote a very good essay about her favorite YouTuber, her favorite YouTube channel, which I had never heard of. It was very odd. It was about some woman who does tutorials on makeup and true crime stories. So they're like true crime murder stories while putting on her makeup. But you know what? It was interesting. And I bet nobody else wrote that essay. Nobody. And it also tied into other things about this student, but it was different. So everybody has something, they just don't realize it. So this is why you really have to do some soul searching to find those things and to figure out what it is about who you are that's different. Everybody's unique. It just it's sometimes harder to figure out how that is.
That's, I think, one thing, Arienne, is more difficult for Chinese cultural family is because, our culture is so protected, they don't want people standing out. By consciousness, the parents don't like the student, their kids, to be so different. You know, they're so worried about they being, you know, in Chinese we call 枪打出头鸟, meaning, you know, in our culture, if somebody is really standing out, then those person will be shot most. So there, you know, that's why our culture, I think it's so difficult to have somebody have their student to write something unique, because just, you know, I think the most common I heard from former admission officer is a lot of Asian kids, they're so cookie cutter. They're all very good in STEM. They're all good in academic, and they going to colleges and they just like I said, motionless. They just not interesting enough.
So can I just say one thing about this, because this ties into something you were saying earlier, Sophia. If there are any parents who have students who are, you know, in 9th, 10th, 11th grade, I think, yes, grades are important and all of these things, but I feel like an awful lot of the Asian parents and families put so much effort on this, and they make their kids spend so much time studying and doing test prep that the students don't have time to find those passions and interests. And like even in summers, the number of families I see where their children are spending their summers taking more classes and doing more test prep. This is the perfect opportunity to let them explore other interests and passions and things like that. So if your student is not yet a senior, think about that, because it really helps them to, and not just to get to know themselves, but these are the things that can often develop into career interests down the road, and it helps them to figure out how to, you know, develop an interest and, you know, do something independently that's not on the list of things you have to do because this is what your teachers and parents say will get you into Harvard.
So true, so true. Totally agreed. Okay, right now it's about 10:50, and I'm going to talking to you about 3 questions. Okay, 3 questions. Then again, thank you very much for everyone spending the holiday, your valuable time to be with us, and me and Arienne and Allison, IvyCompass, we are so appreciative your enthusiasm, your passion, your caring about this subject. We had a great questions. We have a lot of questions from students. Actually, I can tell it's not from parents, coming from students itself. So I can see there's a lot of students on tonight's webinar. So it's great. We had a great time to answer those questions. Like I said, if anyone wanted to have your question not being answered, and I apologize not being covered to all questions, just either come to our WeChat group or put Allison's WeChat or my WeChat. We'll be happy to connecting you with Arienne, and we have discussion, we have dialogue to answer your questions, and hopefully we are able to help your kids to reach their dream, helping them in that process. Okay, let me asking, Lydian Smith says, you do not suggest talk about academic achievement or academic interest in the common application, correct?
Yeah, it's the definitely not achievements. If there's an academic interest that goes, you know, that's an area of passion, that's the genuine interest, not just, okay, I want to be a STEM major, then it can work in your personal statement, but it really has to, you know, say something fundamental and meaningful about you, and show that passion. It can't be because there are a lot of jobs in this, or, you know, my parents say I should major in this. I think it's in general, particularly for Asian students, because there's a perception that they're all good students. So there's this expectation. I think it's even more important to show the human side, to show the interests beyond the obvious academic ones. So that's, I guess if there's a choice, I would lean against that, because I feel like it would be more beneficial, especially for the Asian student, to showcase something else about their personality. They do stand-up comedy or gardening, or they like walking dogs or whatever. Those things will be more memorable and will help to counteract this idea that, oh yes, this is just another professional student.
Great. Yes, you mentioned that during your first slide. not look like and sound like a professional student. Only do student things, study, and nothing else.
Right.
And become a boring person. Okay, coming from NDY, asking if you are interested in multiple subjects, considering double major or minor. For instance, history, computer science, would that be better to focus on one of this or interweave them in regards to diversity and interest? Diversity.
It's the student talking about in the personal statement or when they're actually in college. I mean, I feel like the one thing that's particularly important for a student like that is to make sure that they find a college that is actually that actually supports students doing double majors across disciplines. And that's varies a lot by campus. I mean, one school, for instance, that's really great about encouraging double majors and triple majors is Northwestern. They have so many students that do things like that and that have interesting majors across disciplines. I think you need to choose your school carefully because it's not going to be possible to do that everywhere. You have to find some place that's going to appreciate all of your interests. In terms of personal statement, I wouldn't necessarily be writing about your interests. If they ask you in a writing supplement, what do you want to major in? I mean, be honest, you're interested in multiple things. There's nothing wrong with that.
Thank you. The last question. Lily Smith wrote a lot of questions, and thank you for your engagement with us and putting so much question in the chat box. I really appreciate it. So last question, I'm going to give you the floor. You asked me again several times. Arienne, she's asking, what do you suggest to put in additional information section?
I would only use that. Okay, so if it's an essay, like is there anything else you want us to know about? If it's that kind of question, I would only use that if there's something super important that they need to know. Whether the student themselves had a serious illness that took them out of school for a long time, or there was like some major death or illness in the family, or some other seriously traumatic event. So it's got to be major, not minor stuff that a lot of people would have dealt with. If they also give you the chance to submit other documents, I would not send a resume. That's not particularly useful. If somebody has, an article that's been published in some actual decent, newspaper or scientific journal or historical journal, well, if you have a published article to your credit, you could, and they're asking for extra information, that would be a reasonable thing to put in there. Some colleges allow you to submit an art supplement. If you're a talented musician or artist or something like that, you could certainly submit stuff under the art supplement. But do not drown colleges in extra stuff that isn't going to help you. So only send things that you are really going to add something important and that reach that level of being, impressive, but not saying they're impressive, but that are actually, worth telling them about.
Great. Okay, last one. I saw Anna Liu raise her hand, so I'm going to give you last opportunity to you, Anna. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, thank you for presentation. That's wonderful. So my question is, a while ago, I read an article, essay. It seems like that's being released by Harvard University as a good essay, like examples of a good essay. So in that essay, the student actually talk about a lot about his grandpa. So how, what happened to grandpa's life, and then how he survived and inspired him. So my question is, if I understand it right, a good essay should talk about yourself instead of, your family members, your other people. For example, you just mentioned another student's essay talking about a YouTuber. So do you have any guidelines, how to balance, how much you talk about somebody else and how much relate to you, like inspire you, how you related to between the characters you mentioned and yourself?
I mean, I guess it's sort of a matter of proportion. And you would want it to be, if it's the grandparent situation. I haven't read that particular essay, but in order for it to be effective, it has to connect in a a very meaningful way in how the student was influenced by this grandparent. I guess again, it's proportions. So if you're focusing a personal statement on somebody else, I wouldn't spend more than, let's say, 25% of the essay talking about the person or what happened to them. It's really got to be more about you. How did this impact you, and what have you gotten out of this? How has it shaped you into the person that you are? So, but it's not just about people. Whether you're talking about your hobby or something that happened or an event or whatever, it's always, no matter what you're using and what the main topic is, it's always an excuse to tell them something about you. So even though Costco was the topic of her essay, really the ultimate subject was herself. And it was just that Costco was a great window and a great example, almost a metaphor for who she was. So when you have to use the grandpa or the YouTube channel or Costco or whatever it is to say something about you, and that has to be the important focal part of the essay. So you can do these other things, but if you spend too much time talking about the other thing and not you, it's not going to be effective.
So it's almost like the grandpa and also Costco is like the stage, and you are in the center of that stage. So you set up that scene to let other people through that stage see you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I mean, and it helps to have good stage, but yeah, it's all just a vehicle for sharing the information and showing something about you.
Great. Okay, Anna, thank you very much. The last question is fantastic. I think it really highlights what today's presentation and main message is sharing about Arienne. I think it's about you. Ultimately, it's about the student. You can use other tool or stage or other scene, and then the movie is talk about you as main character.